My name is attorney Sarah Hayes. For almost 40 years, the courtroom was my second home. Some people see it as a cold place where people are punished. I saw it as a place where stories collide, where every word is weighed, and where silence can sometimes be more powerful than testimony. Over the years, I learned that what people say can be rehearsed, polished, even completely false. But what they refuse to say, that often hides the real truth. Before I begin, if you like slow, detailed courtroom stories filled with mystery and careful thinking, subscribe and stay with me until the end of this episode. Because this case I'm about to share is the one that still follows me, even in my quiet retirement. It is the case of the silent defendant. His name was Ethan Cole. At least on paper, he was completely ordinary. 31 years old, a science teacher at an elementary school in Houston, Texas. Clean record, no history with the law. His colleagues described him as polite, reliable, and a little too quiet. His students liked him. Parents trusted him. There was nothing about his life that suggested he would one day be standing in a courtroom, facing one of the most serious accusations a person can face. But one night, everything changed. The police were called to a small rented apartment on the edge of the city. It was the kind of place people pass every day without really seeing, with peeling paint and flickering hallway lights. A neighbor heard a loud crash, some movement, and then a strange quiet. That quiet moment is where this story truly begins. When the officers entered the apartment, they found a man on the floor who clearly needed help, and he didn't receive it in time. Right beside him sat Ethan, calm, awake. His clothes and hands were stained. On the floor nearby was a kitchen knife. When officers asked what happened, Ethan looked at them and said nothing. When they read him his rights, he listened. When they put on the handcuffs, he stood up and walked with them. No struggle, no explanation, no outburst. That was their first impression, a silent man in the middle of a scene that looked very clear. The district attorney's office thought it was a simple case. We have him at the apartment, we have the item, we have witnesses who heard noise around the time. One of the prosecutors said confidently, "We'll get a conviction." No problem. That kind of confidence always makes me careful. Easy cases have a way of hiding sharp edges. I first met Ethan in a small interview room at the detention center. These rooms all feel the same. Neutral walls, metal table, chairs that are just uncomfortable enough to keep you alert. He was already sitting when I entered, hands resting in front of him, posture straight, eyes steady. Not broken, not angry, just quiet. I sat down across from him and placed the file gently on the table. "Ethan, my name is Sarah Hayes," I said. "I'm your attorney. My job is to defend you. I can't do that unless I know what really happened." He looked at me. Not through me, not away from me, directly at me. His eyes were sharp and aware, not empty. I've seen people in shock. This wasn't that. "Did you know the man in the apartment?" I asked, no answer. "His name was listed as Michael Reed," I continued. 45 years old, he owned a local repair shop. "Do you know him from somewhere?" "Nothing." I tried a different angle. "Ethan, are you protecting someone? Were you alone in that apartment?" Still nothing. He didn't fidget, didn't look at his hands, didn't stare at the door. He simply watched me. "All right," I said calmly. "Then let me ask you something very simple. Are you innocent?" For the first time he moved, very slightly. His eyes shifted away from mine and traveled upward toward a ceiling vent in the corner of the room. He stared at it for a moment, focused, almost analytical, like he was checking whether something was still there. Then he looked back at me and blinked twice, slow and deliberate. It was such a small gesture. To anyone else it might have meant nothing, but lawyers are trained to notice small details. A blink is not a legal argument, but my instincts filed it away. The vent mattered to him. When I left the detention center that day, I wasn't just puzzled, I was unsettled. I have represented people who begged me to save them, who cried, who shouted, who lied, who swore 100 times they were innocent. I have also represented a few who admitted they were guilty in private and asked me to do the best I could anyway. Ethan Cole was different. He didn't ask for anything, he didn't claim anything. He simply stayed silent. That evening I broke one of my own personal rules. I took the file home. My husband Mark met me at the door. He noticed the familiar blue folder in my hand and sighed softly. "You know I don't like it when you bring those home," he said with a tired smile. "The house feels heavier when you do." "I know," I replied. "But this one is unusual." I sat at my desk and opened the file. On top was the autopsy report. Time of incident estimated around 11:42 p.m., one precise wound. The report was clinical, as they always are, but a certain kind of precision always makes me think. Someone knew exactly what they were doing. Next were the background details. The victim, Michael Reed, ran a small repair shop. Lived alone, no obvious connection to Ethan. There were no shared addresses, no shared workplaces, no family ties, no financial links that jumped out of the paperwork. That was the first problem. People don't usually end up in a scene like that with a complete stranger for no reason at all. Then there was the apartment itself. It did not belong to Ethan. It did not belong to Michael. It was rented under another name entirely. That was the second problem. 2 men in a third person's apartment late at night with no clear explanation? That is not normal. I turned to the crime scene photos. The room was small and basic. One window which was nailed shut. A simple bed, a small closet, a table, a chair that looked like it had been bumped out of place. A spilled drink on the floor near the table. Nothing suggested a long, chaotic struggle, and yet something had clearly gone very wrong. As I flipped through the photos, one image caught my eye. In the upper corner of the room, there was a ceiling vent. In the picture, the metal cover was visible, and the screws holding it in place looked different from the rest of the room. The room was old, the vent cover was old, but the screws looked newer, shiny, recently replaced. My mind immediately went back to the interview room, to Ethan's eyes moving up toward the vent above us. Why would someone put in new screws on an old vent in a small apartment before a serious incident? People don't usually spend time replacing vent screws unless they're hiding something or retrieving something. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes for a moment, following a habit I developed over the years. When the puzzle feels too neat, I imagine I'm looking at it from the balcony of a theater. The case becomes a stage. The actors become smaller. It helps me see what's missing. In this case, what was missing was motive and connection. The next morning, we had a short hearing in court. Ethan stood beside me in his standard issue clothes, hands in front of him, expression calm. The courtroom murmured quietly as people glanced at him, at me, at the judge, and at the prosecutor. "Mr. Cole," the judge said, looking down from the bench, "you are here today for your initial appearance. You have been informed of the charges. How do you plead?" The room was so quiet you could hear someone adjusting a chair in the back row. All eyes turned to Ethan. He looked ahead, and he said nothing. After a few seconds, which felt much longer than they were, the judge looked at me. "Miss Hayes, does your client understand the charges?" "Yes, Your Honor," I answered. At this time, my client chooses not to speak and will rely on my representation. There was a stir in the gallery. The prosecutor gave a small, satisfied smile, amused by his silence. "This kind of behavior might impress a jury," he said later in the hallway, "but it won't change the facts. He was there and he will be held responsible." I did not answer him. Confidence in a case is normal for a prosecutor. Overconfidence, however, is something else. A short time later, with permission from the authorities, I visited the apartment myself. I prefer standing where people stood, seeing what they saw. Paperwork tells you one story. The room tells you another. The building's hallway smelled faintly of cleaning chemicals and old carpet. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The room was cleaner now, but the outline of the original arrangement was still visible. I tried to imagine the scene as it had been. The victim on the floor, Ethan sitting nearby, the late hour, the silence afterward. I moved slowly, tracing the layout. A small table near the center, a chair that was now back in place. The bed along the wall, the window still nailed shut. And above, the same ceiling vent I'd noticed in the photo. I stood under it for a few seconds, then brought a chair from the table and placed it beneath the vent. I climbed up just enough to reach it. Up close, I could see clearly. The screws were newer than the metal they held. Tiny details like that bother me because people rarely spend time on such things without a reason. I pressed lightly on the vent cover. It gave a little. Something inside shifted just slightly. Not loud, not clear, but enough to tell me there was something there. My mind immediately connected it. Ethan glancing at the vent in the interview room, then this vent with new screws and something behind it. Just then, I heard a voice from the open doorway. "You shouldn't be touching that." I stepped down from the chair and turned around. A woman in her late 50s was standing there, holding a grocery bag. She looked both curious and nervous. "I'm Attorney Hayes," I said, showing her my identification. "I'm representing Mr. Cole." "And you are?" "I live across the hall," she replied, shifting the bag from one hand to the other. "I'm Linda Parker. I heard someone come in. I thought maybe the place was being rented out again." "It's still part of an ongoing case," I explained gently. "You were the one who called the police that night, correct?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, I heard a loud sound, a crash like furniture hitting the floor, then footsteps, and then nothing. I waited a bit, but it felt wrong. So I called. Did you see anyone leaving?" I asked. She hesitated. It wasn't the hesitation of someone making up a story. It was the hesitation of someone deciding how much to say. "I saw someone," she finally answered, lowering her voice. "But I'm not sure." "Not sure about what?" I asked, keeping my tone calm and open. She glanced past me just for a moment toward the vent above my head. "I don't know if I should be talking about this," she whispered. "You're not in trouble," I assured her. "You're helping the truth, that's all. What did you see?" She took a breath. "I heard the noise, like I said, then I opened my door just a little." The hallway lights were dim that night. I saw the door to this apartment move, like someone pulled it almost shut, and I heard quick footsteps, but they weren't going down the stairs. They were lighter, closer. Like someone was moving along the ceiling. I know that sounds strange. I looked up at the vent again, then back at her. "Did you see Ethan at that moment?" "No," she said. "I only saw him later when the police brought him out. He looked calm, too calm, but I know one thing, Miss Hayes." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "When the police say he was alone in there, they're wrong. He was not alone." The room felt different after she said that. The case that everyone called simple had just opened a new door, one that led upward, toward a ceiling vent with new screws and a secret someone did not want found. And in that moment, one thought settled firmly in my mind. This case was never just about a man who refused to speak. It was about someone else. Someone who had moved quietly, left almost no trace, and disappeared before the police arrived. Someone who believed the silent teacher would carry the weight for both of them. And Ethan Cole, the man who sat in court without a word, might be the only person who knew the full story. I stood in that apartment with Linda's words echoing in my mind. He was not alone. If true, that single statement changed the entire foundation of the case. The prosecution believed the story was complete. But if someone else had been inside that vent, even briefly, then nothing about those perfectly aligned facts could be trusted. I thanked Linda for her courage and promised her that if anything else came to mind, she should contact me immediately. As she walked back across the hall, her nervous glance over her shoulder told me she was still afraid of the memory of that night. Fear is a powerful witness when evidence goes silent. I returned to the vent. My fingers brushed the metal again, still cold, still loose at one corner. The new screws weren't just new, they were tightened incorrectly, as if by someone who wasn't used to handling tools. A repair shop owner like Michael Reed would have used the right tools. A school teacher like Ethan Cole wouldn't have replaced vent screws without reason. So who did? I stopped myself before opening it. If something was inside that vent, I wanted it documented properly. Touching the wrong thing could ruin my chance to introduce it in court later. I needed an investigator, someone I trusted. So I stepped away and locked the room behind me. Back at my office, I called private investigator David Mercer, a former detective turned licensed PI. David and I had worked together before. He had the patience to handle details and the curiosity to chase shadows. That vent might be the key, I told him. I want photos, fingerprints if possible. And I want to know when those screws were changed. He listened, then asked, "Do you think someone else was hiding up there?" "That's exactly what I think," I replied, "and if I'm right, then the whole story changes." Later that day, we had another short meeting at the courthouse. Ethan stood beside me, calm as stone. The judge asked if he was ready to enter a plea. No answer. The silence felt bigger this time. The courtroom observers were already forming their own stories in their heads. Quiet people make the imagination louder. After the hearing, a young reporter approached me outside. "Miss Hayes, why won't your client speak? Is he refusing to cooperate?" I answered carefully. "My client is exercising a constitutional right. Silence is not guilt." The reporter smirked, unconvinced. People want explanations, and when they don't get them, they assume the worst. I glanced over at Ethan as deputies guided him back inside. His expression never changed. But his eyes, they were searching the ceiling again, searching for the vent. He was reminding me where to look. That night, I revisited the case file. I flipped through the victim's information again. Michael Reed, 45, owned a repair shop. Not married, a few minor traffic issues, but nothing violent, nothing unusual. Except one thing, 6 months earlier, he had been a witness in a quiet court filing. A brief statement in a case about stolen equipment. The case never made it to trial. Charges were dropped, but the name listed for the person he accused caught my eye, a last name identical to the one that rented the apartment. That was the first real connection. Maybe Ethan wasn't involved at all. Maybe he was the wrong person in the wrong place, or maybe he was there because someone wanted him found. Sleep didn't come easily that night. When cases feel too simple, my mind never rests. Before sunrise, David called. "You need to see this," he said. I arrived at the apartment with him that morning. The hallway was quiet. The air smelled like old paint. Inside, he had set up portable lights and a camera. He pointed to the vent. "I photographed the screws. They're new, like you said," he explained, "but look closer." He handed me a small magnifying viewer. On one screw were tiny traces of fabric fibers, thin, dark, almost invisible to the eye. He continued, "I also checked the duct inside. Just a few inches back, I found this." He handed me a small chain necklace sealed in an evidence bag. The chain looked ordinary, silver, simple, but the pendant hanging from it caught my attention. A small key, thin and sharp. Too small to be for a door, something personal, something important. I examined it closely. Engraved on one side were tiny initials, "Mr. Michael Reed," I whispered. There was no logical reason for the victim's necklace to be hidden in the vent, unless someone put it there in a hurry, unless someone wanted it hidden from the police. David wasn't finished. He pointed inside the vent again. A subtle scratch pattern ran along the metal. "Someone crawled through here," he said quietly, "recently, and they were in a rush." The idea of someone moving silently above the ceiling, watching, waiting, it's not something you want to picture. But I couldn't ignore it. I asked him, could someone fit through that space? David nodded. A smaller person, yes, someone slender, flexible, someone who knows how to move quietly. A feeling settled in my chest, uncertainty mixed with dread. If someone was inside that vent the night Michael died, then they saw everything. They might even be the real cause of what happened. And Ethan, he may have stayed silent not because he was guilty, but because he was afraid. We stepped out of the apartment into the hallway, and that's when David lowered his voice. There's another issue, he said. The building's maintenance records, they've been altered. Someone removed an inspection report for this vent from last month. Altered records. A missing witness, a hidden necklace, a silent defendant, and every thread was pulling upward into the vents. That afternoon, I went to see Ethan again. This time, I walked in with the necklace and placed it on the table between us. Ethan, I said softly, I found this in the vent, the one you looked at. You know what that means, don't you? His eyes dropped to the pendant. For the first time, his face changed, just a flicker, something painful, something real. He looked like a man who wanted to speak but couldn't. Then his eyes rose to meet mine, and he gave the slightest nod. Not a full movement, a fraction, but a nod. It was the first answer he ever gave me. Before I could say anything else, a guard knocked and announced the session was over. They led him away, leaving me staring at the necklace. The tiny key pressed into my palm as I picked it up, and I realized we were now chasing something much bigger than a single incident. That evening, while reviewing everything again, one question would not leave me. If Ethan didn't hide the necklace, then who did? And where were they hiding now? This case was no longer about silence. It was about a secret hiding just out of sight, watching us. After my meeting with Ethan ended, I sat in my car for a long while, holding that necklace with the small key attached. Engraved initials, Mr. Michael Reed's. A key hidden in a vent, too small for a door, too personal to ignore. The simplest question was also the most important. What did it open? There was no lockbox listed in the police report, no locker key found at the shop. The autopsy mentioned no jewelry on the victim. The officers assumed he wasn't wearing anything important that night, but someone thought it was important enough to hide, at the risk of being discovered. Back at my office, I placed the key on a white evidence sheet and stared at it under the lamp. The metal was slightly worn near the top loop, like it had been touched often. A nervous habit, maybe. People twist what they treasure, what they fear to lose. While I was examining it, my phone buzzed. It was Detective Rowland, the officer overseeing the case. Miss Hayes, there's someone you should meet, he said. A person came forward, claims to know your client. The words surprised me. Until now, Ethan was a mystery with no connections. The detective sounded cautious as he continued. She insists she doesn't want to talk to the prosecution. Only you, we have her waiting in interview room 2. I grabbed the key, locked my office, and drove to the station. Interview room 2 was small and brightly lit. Sitting inside was a young woman in her 20s, anxious hands clenched together on the table. She wore a teacher's ID badge. Greenbrook Elementary, the same school where Ethan taught. Her name was Rachel Carter. Thank you for coming, I said gently as I sat down. How do you know Ethan Cole? She swallowed nervously. He was my mentor. I'm a new teacher. He always helped me. He's quiet, but he's kind. He'd never hurt anyone. Her voice shook when she continued. That night, he told me he had to meet someone. He looked worried. He didn't say where he was going, but he gave me something. My heartbeat picked up speed. What did he give you, Rachel? She reached into her bag and carefully placed a small folded note on the table. It was worn at the edges, like someone had crumpled it in their palm before deciding to pass it on. I opened it carefully. The handwriting was small and neat. If I do not return, please give this to someone who will listen. The truth is above us. The hairs rose on the back of my neck. It wasn't just the last sentence, it was the timing. He wrote this before anything happened. Ethan knew he was walking into danger. I placed the note next to the necklace. Rachel noticed the key and gasped softly. That's his. He always wore it on a chain. You're certain? I asked. Yes, she nodded. He said it was the only thing that truly belonged to him. A key that belonged only to Ethan, but engraved with the victim's initials. That didn't add up. If Michael and Ethan barely knew each other, why would Ethan wear something engraved for another man? Unless the key wasn't for Ethan originally. Maybe Michael gave it to him, or someone wanted to make it look that way. Rachel, I asked carefully, did Ethan ever mention someone he was afraid of, or someone who might be watching him? She hesitated, thinking hard. He mentioned a name once, very quietly. Said he hoped he'd never see him again. She lowered her voice. The name was Evan. A chill crept in. Ethan Cole and someone named Evan. Similar names, close ages, related, twins, siblings, or just a coincidence. Courts don't accept coincidences. Neither do I. Before I could ask more, Detective Rowland stepped in. Miss Hayes, we need you in the morgue. There's something you should see. Rachel squeezed her hands tighter. Please, please help him, she whispered. I promised her that I would try. The morgue was cold and sterile. The coroner, Dr. Mitchell, greeted us and pulled open a drawer. Inside was the victim, Michael Reed. But it wasn't the body that Dr. Mitchell wanted me to notice. It was the back of Michael's jacket, laid out beside him. Stitched behind the lining, almost invisibly, was a tiny pouch. Hidden, secret, designed not to be found. Dr. Mitchell slid a gloved hand inside and retrieved a small SD memory card. This wasn't found during the first search, he said. Someone opened the jacket later and hid this behind the lining. But whoever stitched it used a machine, not hand-sewn. It was done professionally. A digital memory card. The key suddenly made sense. The pendant wasn't for a lock, it might be for a case that could store data securely. Something important enough to hide in clothing and vents. Something someone feared would be discovered. The detective asked, "Do you think Ethan did this?" "No," I answered firmly. "I think Ethan was the one who knew too much." We sealed the card as evidence and transferred it to the police cyber unit for examination, but my gut already knew whatever was on that card might explain everything. Motive, connection. Danger. That afternoon, I returned to see Ethan again. This time, I placed both the note and the key on the table, and then I leaned forward, speaking softly but clearly. "Ethan, I found what you were trying to protect." His breath hitched just slightly, the first crack in his wall of silence. His eyes locked on the items, and for the first time I saw fear in them, controlled fear, a fear for someone else, not himself. "I know about the vents," I continued. "I know someone else was there, and I know you're not the only one involved." He pressed his lips together, holding the words inside until the pressure became too much. With a quiet, shaky voice, he finally spoke his first words since the night of the incident. He whispered, "Evan," one name, one breath, one truth finally breaking free. It was enough. A silent teacher, a hidden memory card. A second person disappearing into the vents. A name spoken like a wound. We were no longer defending a man who wouldn't speak. We were defending a man who had been forced into silence. And now that he had said the one name that mattered, the danger wasn't just above us anymore. It was already close. Watching. Ethan's single whispered word hung in the air like it didn't want to leave that room. "Evan." He had waited so long to speak, and the first thing he said wasn't a defense, wasn't an explanation, it was a name. And judging from the fear in his eyes, it was the name of someone who changed everything. The guard stepped in to escort him back before I could ask anything more. Ethan looked at me once over his shoulder, and in that brief moment, his expression said what he couldn't. "Be careful." I gathered the items from the table, the note, the key, and left the station feeling the weight of a truth that was finally beginning to surface. In the hallway, I caught up with Detective Rowland. "We need to run the name Evan Cole through every database we have," I told him. He nodded and typed the name into his phone as we walked out. After a few seconds, he stopped walking. His expression tightened. "This might take time," he said quietly. "There are no records, no birth certificate," I asked, "no school records, no medical records, no driver's license." Officially, Evan Cole did not exist. There are two reasons a person leaves no trace. Either they are never documented or someone erased them. Later that day, the cyber team called. They had examined the memory card. It contained a series of encrypted files, each requiring a password. They couldn't open them yet, but the card had two most recent timestamps, the night before the incident and exactly 11:42 p.m. on the night everything happened. The exact time listed in the autopsy. Someone recorded or saved something at the moment Michael Reed lost his life. The next morning, I went to Greenbrook Elementary School, the place where Ethan taught. The halls were decorated with children's drawings, bright colors, and cheerful messages, a sharp contrast to the dark path the case was taking. The principal, Mrs. Howard, received me in her office. She was calm, gentle, the type of person who spoke softly because she never needed to raise her voice. She said Ethan was among their best teachers, patient, reliable, kind. "The children loved him," she said. "Especially one." She pointed to a framed drawing on her wall. It showed a smiling teacher and a young boy holding a small model rocket. Underneath, in messy handwriting, the caption said, "Mr. Cole and me, we reached the stars," and the signature read, "Liam." "Who is Liam?" I asked. "His younger brother," she answered. I paused. "You mean Ethan's younger brother?" "No," she clarified. "Liam Reed. Michael Reed's son." The connection hit me like a sudden drop in temperature. The victim had a child, and that child admired Ethan more than anyone else at the school. That meant the relationship between the victim and my client wasn't a stranger's story. It was deeper and more personal. It also meant that the key I held, the one engraved with Michael Reed's initials, might not belong to Michael at all. It could be a child's keepsake, a gift from a father to a son, a secret shared only between them. "Where is Liam now?" I asked. Mrs. Howard's face softened with worry. "He's staying with relatives. He is very shaken and hasn't spoken since that night." Another person silenced by fear. After leaving the school, I met with my investigator, David. He had dug deeper into the rental history of the apartment. The name listed on the lease was Andrew Cole, not Ethan, not Evan, a third Cole. "Is there any record of an Andrew Cole?" I asked. David nodded. "Yes, a man with a history of short-term rentals across multiple states. No arrests. No close family listed, but he disappeared from records about a year ago. 3 Coles, 1 apartment, 1 silent defendant." As we spoke in the hallway outside my office, David leaned in. "There's something else," he said. "That ceiling vent, the duct above it leads to multiple units. You could move from one apartment to the next without ever being noticed if you knew the layout. So whoever hid in that vent might not have left through the hallway," I realized. Exactly, they could have crawled straight into the next apartment over. Someone was watching from above. That night, just as I sat down to review the files again, my phone rang. The voice on the other end was tense and familiar. It was Rachel, the young teacher. "Miss Hayes, I think someone was in my house." "Are you hurt?" I asked immediately. No, but things were moved. My laptop was on when I got home. I didn't leave it that way. What was missing? She hesitated. Nothing except a picture of Ethan with his class, the one where Liam is standing next to him. Why would someone steal just a picture? Unless it showed something or someone they didn't want connected to Ethan. I told her to leave the house immediately and meet me at the station. She was shaking when she arrived, eyes wide with fear. The picture missing wasn't random. Whoever took it knew exactly what mattered. Back in the interview room, I showed Ethan a photograph of the drawing Liam made. His eyes softened when he saw it. Then I whispered, "Liam is scared." "Just like you." He closed his eyes and a tear formed at the corner. His silence wasn't stubbornness, it was protection. He wasn't afraid of punishment. He was afraid of what speaking would cause. I leaned forward. "Ethan, someone is still out there. They've already come after Rachel. They might go after Liam. I can't stop them unless you help me." He shook his head slowly. "Not safe," he whispered, voice fragile, cracking from disuse. "Then we'll keep them safe together," I promised. "But I need to know, who is Evan?" His hand trembled slightly on the table. He looked straight into my eyes. "My brother," there it was, the missing piece. "And Andrew?" I asked. "Cousin," he breathed. "We were supposed to protect each other." His voice was fading again, retreating back into silence. "What happened that night, Ethan?" He swallowed, struggled, then whispered, "Evan took something from Michael. He said it would fix everything." He looked at the necklace and key, but it only made things worse. We were so close, but before he could say more, there was a sharp knock. The door opened. A deputy stepped in, face tight. "Miss Hayes, we need you outside, now." I stood quickly, my heart already bracing for something wrong. In the hallway, Detective Rowland rushed toward me. "We just got word," he said, voice low and urgent. "There was an attempted break-in at the relative's home where Liam is staying. A child, the victim's son, targeted." My chest tightened. The real danger wasn't hiding anymore, it was moving fast. Ethan was silent because speaking could put a child at risk, and whoever Evan was, they were willing to do anything to cover their tracks. The silent defendant wasn't the criminal in this story, he was the shield. And the person who needed protection the most was a little boy who liked rockets and trusted the wrong adults. The moment I heard about the attempted break-in at Liam's relative's home, every doubt I still had collapsed into certainty. This was not a case of a teacher losing control. It was a case of someone trying to erase the truth. And children have a way of noticing truths adults ignore. Children observe what they are never meant to see. I drove to the address where Liam was staying. A quiet neighborhood, neat lawns, porch lights glowing warmly. But that sense of safety was nothing more than decoration. 2 patrol units sat out front. The relatives, aunt and uncle, waited nervously inside with Liam close between them. The boy, maybe 7 years old, clutching a small toy rocket in his hands. The same kind he drew in that picture with Ethan. I knelt down so my eyes met his. "Hi, Liam, I'm Miss Hayes." His grip tightened around the toy. His uncle spoke up. He hasn't said a word since that night. He's scared. Scared of what he saw, scared of who he saw. I sat beside him, keeping my voice gentle. "Your dad cared about you very much." His chin trembled. He didn't look at me. Instead, he looked at the ceiling, just like Ethan did. That single glance said more than words. He, too, knew something was above them that night. I asked the aunt what happened. We were in the kitchen. The alarm went off at the back door. Someone tried to pry it open. When the alarm blared, they ran. The police found marks on the door frame. They're checking the cameras now. She paused. Why would someone target a child? Because he is a witness, I thought, the most important witness. I stood, thanked them, and stepped outside with Detective Rowland. "We need to get him secured immediately." "Protective custody." He nodded and made the call. As we walked to our cars, David, my investigator, called me. "Sarah, I found Andrew Cole," he said, "or at least where he used to be." Andrew had rented multiple apartments under different aliases, but the phone number on one old lease still had activity. "He checked messages just 2 hours ago," David added. That meant Andrew wasn't just alive, he was close. We agreed to meet the next morning, but sleep wasn't going to find me tonight. So I returned to the police cyber office to check the SD card again. The technician, a focused young specialist named Harper, had been working on decrypting the files. "I can't open them fully yet," she explained, "but I was able to view some file names." She handed me a printed list. 11:42 p.m. for EC. Confidential PDF, repair record AM for hidden ducks layout.jpg. Everything pointed to something being recorded or documented without the knowledge of others. A layout of hidden ducks. A video taken at the exact time of the incident. A confidential file with Ethan's initials. This wasn't random. It was a cover-up meticulously prepared. Harper then showed me a blurry preview, just one frozen frame from the M4. A dim room, a figure wearing dark clothes. A gloved hand reaching up toward a vent cover. The image wasn't clear yet, but I could see one thing that made my pulse jump. The person wasn't Ethan, too small, too fast. Too familiar with those vents, someone else was up there. The next morning I arrived early at my office. David was waiting with fresh findings. He placed a printed document on my desk, a hospital birth record. There were 2 babies born to the Cole family. Ethan and Evan, twins, but only one Cole survived childhood according to official records. Evan's death certificate listed a tragic accident at age 10. The file even showed a small funeral service. Evan officially had been gone for more than 20 years, yet Ethan spoke his name yesterday. That means either the records were wrong or someone had faked a child's death to erase him from the world. If Evan was alive, he had grown up invisible, untraceable, a shadow, someone with no documents, no school records, no fingerprint in any system, someone who could slip through vents without anyone knowing he existed. I stared at their childhood photos that David found. 2 boys, almost identical. Ethan smiling shyly at the camera while Evan stared from behind him, half hidden, one hand gripping Ethan's shoulder. The kind of closeness that's built from relying on each other, perhaps a secret they shared. Why would someone fake a brother's death? I asked quietly. David replied, some families hide what they're ashamed of. The idea that a child could be erased because he was inconvenient, dangerous, felt painfully familiar to the world I once argued against in court. Detective Roland entered then. We need to talk, he said. The victim's repair shop. Michael, read, there's something strange there. He showed us photos taken by officers that morning. The lock had been broken, tools scattered. A back office torn apart, files missing. The place had been searched recently, likely the same person who tried to break into the relative's home. Someone was racing us to destroy every connection between Michael, Ethan, and Evan. We drove to the shop together. Inside, dust floated through the rays of sunlight that slipped in through cracks in the wall. A place that once repaired broken things now looked broken itself. In the back, we noticed loose ceiling tiles. Someone had pushed them aside to climb up into the attic-like crawl space. The same hiding method repeated. The vents, the ceilings, the spaces above. Whoever we were dealing with lived in places where others never looked, above us. Watching, listening, planning. Then we found another clue. On the floor behind the desk was a notebook. Its pages torn and smeared, but one note remained readable. He knows about the ducks, must move fast. Ethan knew about the ducks because Evan lived in them. And Michael Reed, did he discover the truth? Did he threaten to expose it? If so, someone silenced him before he could speak. And pinned the blame on Ethan, the visible brother, the one who left footprints. The silent defendant had been set up from the start. What scared me most wasn't what we found, but the feeling that we were being watched right then. A subtle noise above the ceiling tiles made all of us freeze. Something shifted in the shadows overhead. We weren't alone in that shop. David grabbed his flashlight. The beam cut through the dust. Silence for a moment. Then another sound, light scraping like fingers or shoes moving through a narrow metal tunnel. Whoever it was, they were crawling away fast. Up there, Roland shouted as he and David rushed toward a ladder that led to the crawl space. I stayed below, heart pounding, eyes on the ceiling. The crawling sounds moved toward the far end of the shop and then nothing. Gone. Roland came down, frustrated. He escaped into the next building. These ducks connect half the block. I repeated. Roland nodded. From the look of the shadow, smaller build. Quick, you think it's Evan? The shadow above us once was silent, I whispered. He's the one we've been chasing. We left the shop under police supervision, knowing we had just missed the person who had been controlling this story from above. A person who learned to exist where law rarely looked. Before heading back, I checked on Liam again. He was safe, staying at a secure location now. I asked gently if his teacher ever mentioned someone named Evan. The boy's eyes flickered. He hugged his toy rocket tighter. Then he whispered so softly I almost missed it. He watches from the air vents. Every instinct in me tensed. This boy had seen the truth. He knew the danger, and now that danger was looking for him. We were no longer just defending a silent man. We were racing against someone who lived in the shadows above us and who believed silence was survival. The truth was rising toward the surface, and so was the threat. Liam's small whispered words, "He watches from the air vents," replayed in my mind like a warning. Children don't invent terror like that. They react to what they see. And Liam had seen the one person who should not exist. Evan Cole, the shadow brother, the unseen witness, the invisible suspect. We placed Liam under full protective custody that same day. Officers stayed outside the room all night. A child was now the center of this storm, and nothing mattered more than keeping him safe. Meanwhile, I returned to the station to check on Ethan. The guard escorted me down the hallway to the interview room. When I entered, he was sitting exactly as before, posture upright, hands still, eyes aware, but something had changed. He looked relieved, as if he was silently thanking me for keeping Liam safe. "We found him," I said softly. "We know Evan is alive." He blinked once, a confirmation. "You've protected him your entire life, haven't you?" His eyes lowered and he whispered a single word, "Yes." "Your family hid him to avoid records?" I asked. He nodded once. "And Michael discovered the truth?" Another nod. Piece by piece, the entire story was assembling itself. The victim wasn't random. Ethan wasn't involved by chance. Michael Reed had likely discovered the existence of a person who shouldn't exist, someone who had been living invisibly between walls and above ceilings. "Why did you go to that apartment?" I continued. He hesitated, searching for the right safe answer. "To warn him." "Warn who?" "Michael." My breath caught. "Ethan went there to save Michael, not harm him." And Evan, he closed his eyes, pain written in the small muscles of his face. He followed. The silent defendant wasn't the threat. He was a witness to a crime committed by someone he loved. Before I could ask more, the guard interrupted, a lawyer visit for another inmate. We had to stop. But this time, Ethan left behind a truth he never intended to speak. He went into that apartment trying to stop the worst outcome. When I returned to my office, David was already there with new findings. You need to see this, he said. He turned his laptop toward me. Surveillance footage from a hardware store, timestamped 2 days before the incident. A man with a cap pulled low, buying the exact screws found on the vent. Slim build, nervous movements, an adult version of the shadow we saw above the shop. Facial recognition? I asked. Negative, David replied. No ID match. It's like he doesn't exist. Because legally, he didn't. The idea of a full-grown man who had never been photographed, fingerprinted, or recorded on any official document, that alone would make this case headline news. But the truth was darker. Someone raised a child to survive unseen, to move through the world without making a sound, to erase his existence from society. And when that invisible person made a mistake, someone else would be blamed. We decided to visit the apartment again with a forensic team this time. The police sealed off multiple units surrounding the original crime scene. The ducts between them formed a maze of metal tunnels. Marks inside showed recent movement, footprints of shoes smaller than Ethan's. David pointed out strands of dark hair caught on a screw. It was enough to send to DNA testing. If it matched Ethan or didn't, we'd have confirmation. As the forensic team worked, I noticed the door of the next apartment over. It was locked, but the lock was damaged from the inside, like someone had broken out of it through the ceiling duct, not in through the door. Inside, the place was dusty but lived in. Not by someone with a normal life. Blankets piled where the bed should be, empty food wrappers tucked away quietly, and a stack of children's books. One book was colored in sloppy but sweet drawings, signed with the initials EC or maybe FC. It was hard to know which brother held the crayon. And then I saw something chilling, a crayon drawing taped to the wall. 2 boys. One tall, one small, holding hands beneath a skylight. Above them, drawn with a black crayon, were eyes, too many eyes watching them. Words written beneath, we stay where people don't look. This wasn't just survival. It was a fear-driven rule. Someone taught Evan that the world below the ceilings was dangerous, that he must stay hidden, that speaking could get him hurt. Suddenly, a crash echoed from the hallway. Officers shouted. I rushed out with David. 2 deputies were standing near the exit, weapons drawn upward at an open ceiling tile. Dust floated down like falling snow. He was right above us, one officer said. We almost had him. Evan had been in the building the entire time. Watching, listening, tracking our every move. Back at the station, Detective Roland met us with new information. The SD card decoded one file, he announced. Harper pulled it up on a screen. A low-quality video opened. Michael Reed's voice sounded panicked. If anyone sees this, he's not supposed to exist. They lied about him, he's alive, and he's dangerous. The camera shook violently as the video ended. Michael had been trying to expose Evan. And Evan reacted the only way he had been taught, by hiding and making threats disappear. I looked down the hall toward the holding cells. Ethan sat inside, alone, the only Cole the world recognized. He had been carrying the weight of his brother's choices. Silence was his protection, his shield, his prison. I walked toward the cell. He stood as I approached, eyes full of fear and hope intertwined. Evan didn't mean to, he whispered through the bars. He doesn't understand right and wrong like we do. He only understands danger. Danger that Michael represented. Danger that witnesses like Rachel and Liam represented. Danger that I was becoming. I placed my hand against the bars. We will protect him, I said, but we must stop him before someone else gets hurt. Suddenly, shouts erupted from the front entrance. Officers sprinted toward the lobby. I followed, heart pounding, just in time to see a figure dart across the roof of a patrol car, leaping with inhuman speed toward the side of the building. A slim figure, hoodie pulled tight. Face unseen, he vanished into an open vent on the exterior wall. He's here, Roland said, breathless, inside the precinct. The silent brother, the invisible suspect, was now in the very building holding Ethan. We were no longer looking for the threat above us. He was closing in from the inside. Chaos moved through the station like a silent wave. Officers rushed in every direction, radios blaring warnings. A suspect loose inside the police precinct is every department's nightmare, especially when the suspect moves like smoke through vents and ceilings. Detective Roland signaled 2 officers to stay with Ethan while the rest formed search teams. David stayed at my side, ready for whatever we were walking into. This building, built decades ago, had its own network of old ducts and crawl spaces connecting hallways, offices, storage rooms, spaces designed for wires and air, not people. Yet Evan moved through them like they were hallways made just for him. Roland turned to me. Stay behind us. If he's here for Ethan, he won't stop. I looked toward the holding cells and saw Ethan gripping the bars with trembling hands. He knew exactly what his brother was capable of, not out of malice but out of instinct. Evan had spent his whole life hiding in the shadows. Now the shadows were fighting back. We started searching office by office. Every ceiling tile became a door, every vent a possible escape route. The fluorescent lights flickered once, a reminder that someone had access to the building's veins. David whispered quietly he could be anywhere, and that scared me more than knowing where he was. Suddenly, a loud metallic bang echoed from the far end of the hallway near the evidence room. We all sprinted, weapons drawn. The evidence room door stood slightly ajar. When Roland pushed it open, the light inside flickered on and off. Rows of shelves stood tall and silent, filled with sealed bags and tagged items from countless cases. Something moved in the upper corner fast. A vent cover rattled and fell to the floor. Dust rained down. Roland shined his flashlight upward into the dark opening. The beam caught a glimpse of fabric, a hoodie sleeve. "Stop, police!" Roland shouted, but it was useless. Evan was already moving through another duct. We bolted into the adjoining hallway, following the sound of metal scraping above us. Like a heartbeat traveling through the ceiling. Faster, closer, he was heading toward the holding cells, toward Ethan. We rushed back, but when we arrived, the cell block was strange and too quiet. One officer was on the ground, unconscious. The other struggled to sit up, holding the back of his head where he'd been struck. Ethan was standing inside his cell, eyes wide, staring upward. "He's here," he whispered. I looked up, the ceiling vent above Ethan's cell hung open. A single screw spun slowly as it loosened itself, falling to the floor with a soft metallic ping. The officers quickly unlocked the cell and pulled Ethan out. He clung to my arm, shaking, the first time I had ever seen him lose composure. "Where is he going?" I asked, but Ethan's trembling lips barely formed the words. "Where people don't look." Roland gestured for officers to surround Ethan and escort him to a secure interrogation room deeper inside the building, one with no ceiling ducts overhead. I accompanied them, my heart racing, knowing Evan was still listening, still watching, still planning. Inside the secure room, Ethan sat at the table, tears in his eyes. "He's trying to fix what he thinks I broke," he whispered. "He thinks I betrayed the family, exposed him." "But you didn't," I said firmly. He shook his head. "Michael found out. He said he would help Evan live a normal life, but Evan didn't trust him. He thought Michael would tell the world. And then we came too late." His voice cracked. I tried to stop him. For the first time, Ethan's silence revealed its true cause, loyalty mixed with fear. A lifetime of protecting a brother the world believed was gone. Before I could respond, the building lights flickered once, twice, then went dark. Emergency red lighting activated, bathing the halls in a dim, pulsing glow. Radios crackled with static. Officers shouted directions. Evan had found the electrical room. We moved Ethan out again toward the basement transfer tunnel. Roland planned to relocate him to a different facility entirely. "Too much risk keeping him here," he said quietly. "His brother knows every inch of this place now." As we turned a corner, an officer ahead of us froze. He pointed his flashlight upward. The ceiling panel above the stairwell hung slightly open, shifting with the faintest movement inside. David whispered, "He's following us." No one breathed. A thin string of dust fell from the gap. Then suddenly a hand shot down, pale, quick, grabbing the flashlight from the officer's grip and yanking it upward into the darkness. The officer stumbled backward in fear. Roland barked orders. Two officers fired a warning shot into the air. The sound bounced violently through the halls. The vent cover slammed shut and the rapid scraping of movement echoed inside the ducts, a signal he was on the move again. The emergency lights flickered again, like the building itself was holding its breath. We reached the reinforced transfer tunnel, thick walls, sealed ceiling, no vents. Roland punched in the code and the heavy door unlocked with a loud mechanical clank. Once inside, the door shut behind us, sealing us in a safer space. But my relief didn't last. On the far side of the room, a line of small indicator lights blinked red, signaling motion detected inside the ventilation system leading here. Someone was already crawling toward our location before the door even opened. Ethan froze, his voice cracked as he whispered, "He thinks I called them. He thinks I'm giving up our secret." "He's trying to save you," I said. "He just doesn't know how." The motion indicators continued moving right above us, growing closer. Then silence, that terrible, familiar silence. Everyone raised their weapons toward the ceiling. A single screw dropped from the vent above, hitting the ground quietly. Ping, we all backed away with guns drawn. But instead of breaking through, the scraping retreated, the motion indicator lights now moving in the opposite direction. He wasn't coming for Ethan anymore. He was going after Liam. "He thinks the boy will speak," Ethan whispered, horrified. "He's terrified." Roland slammed his hand on the radio. "Units, protect the boy, repeat, protect the boy." Static, no answer. David stepped closer to me, voice low and urgent. "If he reaches that safe house before we do," We didn't let him finish. All of us sprinted toward the exit. The elevator was too slow. We took the stairs. When we burst outside, the cool night air hit my face like a warning. Squad cars roared to life. Sirens screamed. But the darkness above the roof, shifting, told me what I already knew. Evan Cole wasn't running along the streets. He was moving through the vents, the attics, the hidden paths connecting the city's forgotten spaces, directly toward the only child who could reveal the truth. Ethan grabbed my arm, desperate. "Please," he begged softly, the first plea he had ever spoken. "Protect him." I looked him in the eyes. "I will," I promised, and I meant every word. We sped through the night with patrol cars leading the way, sirens cutting through the darkness. Every second felt like another inch Evan could gain on Liam, a child who didn't understand why the world suddenly became dangerous. A child who trusted the wrong secret. As we approached the safe house, officers were already outside with flashlights. One of them waved us in urgently. "We saw movement on the roof," he said. "He's here." Inside, Liam sat on a couch, arms wrapped around his knees, rocking slightly as if trying to disappear into himself. The officers formed a protective circle around him. I knelt down in front of him again. "You're safe." "I'm right here." He looked up, eyes wide, breathing short. And then he whispered something he hadn't said before, something that shattered any illusion of safety. "He thinks I told. He thinks the child exposed him." Even though Liam had barely spoken at all. That's how fear works, it invents enemies. Detective Roland moved through the house, checking ceiling corners, vents, every shadow. Then he stopped. His flashlight caught a small, dusty footprint on the bookshelf, a footprint high above the floor. He was here already, watching, listening. "Get the boy out now," Roland ordered. Officers escorted Liam through the back door into a bulletproof vehicle. The moment they stepped outside, something shifted in the vent overhead, a light scrape of metal on metal. Too fast to see, too close to ignore. We rushed out the back after them. The vehicle peeled away down the road, Liam safe inside. But I knew Evan wouldn't chase them on the streets. That wasn't his world. His world was overhead. I turned to Roland. "We need to go back to the source," I said. "The apartment, this ends where it began." By the time we arrived, more units were stationed outside. Officers guarded every exit and roof access. Inside, the old hallway creaked under our footsteps. The air felt heavier, like fear had settled into the walls. We reached the apartment and stepped inside. The vent Ethan stared at from day one was right above us. I took a step forward, staring up into the darkness. "Evan," I said quietly, "we don't want to hurt you." My voice carried through the vent like the hush of a forgotten memory. "Your brother wants to help you. He always has." A soft rustle answered me, closer than expected. David raised his flashlight and aimed it at the vent. A pair of eyes stared back, wide, frightened, unsure whether to attack or run. Those were the eyes of a child trapped in a man's life. "Evan," I continued softer, "you've been hiding for so long, but you don't have to hide anymore. No one here wants to take you away." He blinked, a child's reflex. His voice emerged, thin, quiet, unsure of being heard. "They want to lock me in a cage." "No," I said, "we want to give you a life, a real one, a life where you don't live in the dark." He trembled. The vent cover rattled under his fingers. I could see the inner battle, instinct telling him to flee upward, toward safety, his heart telling him to trust the only people who had ever protected him. Detective Roland slowly gestured to two officers. "Open the side vents," he whispered. "We'll surround him carefully." They moved into adjacent apartments. Evan heard them. Panic flashed in his eyes. He started crawling backward fast, and I reacted on instinct. "Evan," I called. "Liam is safe." He froze. That name was his weakness, not fear but love. "You watched over him when his father couldn't," I said. "You protected him the only way you knew how, but you don't have to protect him from us. We're trying to do what Michael wanted, help both of you." The vent creaked as he moved forward again. He lowered himself slowly, uncertainly into the room. Officers stayed still, no sudden movements. When his feet touched the floor, he looked smaller, younger, thin, clothes worn, eyes darting between me and the exit. Ethan, escorted by officers, appeared at the doorway. His voice cracked. "Evan." The younger brother turned at the sound. His face, fear mixed with relief, softened. Ethan stepped inside. Everyone held their breath. Evan stumbled forward and wrapped his arms around Ethan like a child afraid of the world. For the first time, the brothers were together on the ground, not separated by walls or vents. Ethan whispered, "It's okay, I'm here. You don't have to run anymore." Officers approached carefully. Evan tensed. Ethan tightened his grip and whispered to him. I couldn't hear what he said, but whatever it was brought Evan enough peace to let them place cuffs gently on his wrists, not as a criminal, but as someone needing protection. The case didn't end that night. Courtrooms never closed their doors so quickly. But for the first time, the truth was louder than silence. Weeks later, the courtroom was filled with curiosity and disbelief. A hidden brother coming to light isn't a common headline. Ethan sat beside me at the defense table. Evan, under medical and psychological supervision, was represented by another attorney. He didn't look toward the audience or the cameras. He looked at the floor, a place with no vents. I stood and addressed the court. My client did not commit a violent act. He attempted to prevent one. He remains innocent. And this time, the evidence supported every word I said. The judge listened. The jury listened. The truth spoke louder than silence. Ethan Cole was found not guilty. After the verdict, Ethan turned to me with quiet emotion in his eyes. "Thank you," he said. His voice was stronger than before, still soft, but no longer afraid. Outside the courthouse, Liam ran toward Ethan and hugged him tightly. The boy who knew everything finally felt safe enough to smile again. Evan watched from a distance, flanked by officers. His expression wasn't anger. It was something closer to hope that he might someday step fully into the world he'd only observed from above. As they took him away to receive the care he needed, I realized something important. Ethan was never just defending himself. He was defending the only family he had left. In the end, the silent defendant wasn't silent anymore. He spoke and saved the truth. And I, retired now, walking away from my final case, couldn't help but feel humbled. After 40 years in courtrooms, I thought I had seen everything. But sometimes, silence tells the most powerful story of all.